First, if education reformers are to sustain our positive influence over American education policy, we will have to adopt a mindset. Education reform leaders, be they politicians, be they bureaucrats like me, be they foundations, be they journalists, education leaders will have to adopt a mindset of national responsibility over activist, self-righteous sympathy. Now, I understand why we have the self-righteous rhetoric. I understand where it comes from. The reform fight was catalyzed years ago in urban environments. New York City, I was a part of it. New Jersey, Oakland, Houston. Here, Teach for America alumni and other highly educated reformers came together with philanthropists and they started charter schools. They started accountability initiatives. They advocated against entrenched interests. And the ingredients blended very well. The cause of the poor in those urban environments, the resources of the wealthy in those urban environments, and the flagrant ineptness of urban school boards. The idea that quality education is a right long overdue for African American and Latino youth in poor rural environments, especially those living, as I said, in the large cities, has fueled the reform movement. It has been the flying banner in fights over equitable funding, over school choice, over collective bargaining agreements. It has called tens of thousands of talented college graduates to a profession that they never otherwise would have considered. It is a powerful rallying cry, the right of the urban poor to a quality education, and it should be sustained. But if reformers lean too heavily on that message, if that becomes the exclusive message, then we risk our relevance to the future of American public education. Reform leaders are attractive for their earnestness. They're attractive for their brazenness. But if they continue to rely on the self-righteous rhetoric of sympathy for the urban poor only, the narrative around education reform, the brazenness, the earnestness of its leaders will continue to make the narrative more about the messenger than about the cause itself. It will be more about the character than about what the character is actually trying to say. And we have to address that this has become a problem in the way that the reform story is told across the country. My first reading this morning, I know this deeply offends you journalists, my first reading this morning, every morning, is not in Politico, and it's not in the Washington Post, or whatever you all read. It's in the papers in Lake Charles, it's the paper in New Orleans, the paper in Baton Rouge, the paper in Shreveport, the paper in Monroe. Each of them are looking for their own version of this populist narrative of reform crusader versus the working people. They take their cues from the bigger media. And as with national outlets, they tell the education story through caricatures and allegories. Here's what they talk about. More teachers are retiring. State takes local dollars. Reformers versus locals. The populist versus the powerful. That's the story in the mainstream papers of our country on education reform too often, and it is a tiresome story. Also important, most Americans don't live in Los Angeles. Most Americans don't live in Houston. Most of them don't live in here in Washington. Most of them don't even live in New York City. Most Americans don't reside among staggering contrasts between the wealthy and their foundations and the urban poor and their challenges. And most don't have hip neighborhoods nearby through which to recruit the nation's top college graduates to come live in a flourish of style in Williamsburg or wherever you happen to be. I know DC is just becoming hip, so it'll come someday. Inequity tears at the fabric of all of our society. All of our society is feeling the weight of that inequity. You can feel it everywhere. And while an activist reformer should and has burrowed into the deep challenge of urban poverty, a national leader has to see inequity as a sickness that has infiltrated all of our society.